2024/254. Please raise their hand. Those against? Abstention. The result of the voting is as follows: 14 votes in favor, 0 vote against, 1 abstention. The draft resolution has been adopted as Resolution 2728, 2024.
Colleagues, we appreciated the willingness of members of this council to take some of our edits and improve on this resolution. Still, certain key edits were ignored, including our request to add a condemnation of Hamas. And we did not agree with everything in the resolution. For that reason, we were unfortunately not able to vote yes. And we believe it was important for the council to speak out and make clear that our any ceasefire must come with the release of all hostages. Colleagues, we meet during the holy month of Ramadan. This should be a season of peace for Muslim communities around the world. Just as October 7th, Simchat Torah, should have been a day of peace for Jewish communities. This resolution rightly acknowledges that during the month of Ramadan, we must recommit to peace. Hamas can do that by accepting the deal on the table. A ceasefire can begin immediately with the release of the first hostage. And so we must put pressure on Hamas to do just that. This is the only path to securing a ceasefire and the release of hostages, as we have all called for today. That is what this resolution means. A ceasefire of any duration must come with the release of hostages.
Tensions between the United States and Israel were exposed on Monday when Washington stood aside and allowed the UN Security Council to pass a resolution calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The U.S. decision to abstain on the vote prompted Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to cancel a scheduled trip to the U.S. by 2 of his top advisors, 2 Israeli officials said. The U.S. had previously vetoed similar resolutions calling for a ceasefire. Its position evolved last week when on Friday, it put forward a ceasefire resolution tied to the release of hostages. That resolution fell when it was vetoed by Russia and China. The U.S. abstention on Monday's vote allowed the latest resolution to pass, when the other 14 members of the 15-strong council voted yes. The U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, said that while the latest resolution included edits requested by the U.S., Washington could not vote yes because it did not agree with everything. A ceasefire could have come about months ago if Hamas had been willing to release hostages, the ambassador said, calling on member states and the Security Council to demand that Hamas accepts the deal on the table. Any ceasefire must come with the release of all hostages, she added. The resolution, put forward by the 10 non-permanent members of the Security Council, demands an immediate ceasefire for the month of Ramadan, the immediate and unconditional release of hostages, and the urgent need to expand the flow of aid into Gaza. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said a failure to implement the resolution would be unforgivable. The Security Council just approved a long-awaited resolution on Gaza, demanding an immediate ceasefire and the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. This resolution must be implemented. Failure would be unforgivable, Guterres wrote on X, previously known as Twitter. Both Hamas and the Palestinian Authority welcomed the resolution, while Israeli ambassador to the United Nations Gilad Erdan criticized the Security Council for passing a measure that called for a ceasefire without conditioning it on the release of the hostages. It undermines the efforts to secure their release, he said at the United Nations. Israeli Foreign Minister Israel Katz said on X his country would not abide by the resolution. The State of Israel will not cease fire, Katz said. We will destroy Hamas and continue to fight until the last of the hostages returns home. The Biden administration made the choice to abstain rather than veto the UN Security Council resolution over the weekend when they were able to work on changing certain parts of the resolution's text, according to a senior administration official. Another source familiar with the matter said that the U.S. had planned to veto, but there were intensive diplomatic efforts to find a compromise that put them in a position to abstain. Initially, the text demanded a permanent ceasefire and did not mention negotiations to release hostages, and the U.S. was able to push for the text to change so that it referenced a lasting ceasefire and included language about the ongoing hostage release efforts, the official said. For those reasons, the U.S. believed that the resolution was consistent with U.S. policy, the official said, a sentiment echoed by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Because the final text does not have key language we view as essential, notably a condemnation of Hamas, we could not support it. This failure to condemn Hamas is particularly difficult to understand coming days after the world once again witnessed the horrific acts terrorist groups commit, Blinken said in a statement. The UN vote on Monday came as tensions grow over a looming Israeli military operation in Gaza's southern city of Rafah. The U.S. has been calling on Israel to explain how it will protect the 1.4 million Palestinians seeking refuge there ahead of the expected incursion, which the U.S. said would be a mistake. The UN ambassador of the Palestinian territories, Riyad Mansour, said the decision was a vote for life to prevail. It has taken 6 months for the Security Council to demand an immediate ceasefire, and over 100,000 killed and maimed, 2 million displaced, and famine for this council to immediately demand an immediate ceasefire, Riyad said. Israel's National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi and Ron Dermer, a member of the War Cabinet and close advisor to Netanyahu, had been scheduled to travel to Washington on Monday night to discuss the offensive and U.S. alternatives, but the visit was canceled after the vote. National Security spokesman John Kirby offered a fuller response to Netanyahu's decision to cancel the delegation, saying the U.S. was disappointed by the decision to cancel the trip. "We're very disappointed that they will not be coming to Washington, D.C., to allow us to have a fulsome conversation with them about viable alternatives to going in on the ground in Rafah," he said. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller called the cancellation surprising and unfortunate. One U.S. official told that scrapping the visit was an overreaction that most likely reflects Netanyahu's own domestic political concerns. Netanyahu did not communicate directly with Biden over the decision, and the president has no plans to phone Netanyahu to discuss the matter, the official said. Separately, Israel agreed to a U.S. proposal on a prisoner hostage deal, according to analyst Barak Ravid's reporting on the recent round of talks in Doha. The reported deal could see the release of around 700 Palestinian prisoners, among them 100 serving life sentences for killing Israeli nationals, in exchange for the release of 40 Israeli hostages held by Hamas in Gaza. However, Hamas said more issues remain unresolved beyond the release of Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails. Hamas senior officials Bassem Naim told that Israeli-American media was adding pressure on the talks. "For us, the negotiations are not only centric around the prisoner exchange deal," he said. Israel has not agreed to any of Hamas' requests related to a complete ceasefire, the withdrawal of all forces from the Gaza Strip, even in stages, and the return of all displaced people to their homes, Naim said.